Chapters 1 to 7 of Leviticus have been concerned with the various types of sacrifices. The following section is about the ordination of the priests. This process is covered in chapters 8 to 10. Some scholars have identified the process as a rite of passage, of the sort which occurs in other cultures. A familiar example would be the process of a boy becoming a man in some tribe. The passage in this case is from common to sacred. The process began in chapter 8, and towards the end of that chapter, the priests-to-be are in a dangerous liminal state. That is, they are now in between the stages. This is why they have to stay in the tent for 7 days. Chapter 9 sees the concluding stage of this rite of passage, where the priests are now classed as sacred. There is a glorious, joyful moment with all the congregation when, in verse 23, the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people, and in verse 24, when fire from the Lord consumed the offering. But immediately following this happy conclusion is error and horror. Aaron's oldest sons offer unholy fire, and again fire comes from the Lord, this time to consume them. Their exact offence has puzzled readers, and later in Judaism various explanations were offered. Perhaps they used coals from the wrong source. Perhaps also they were drunk, as the prohibition in verse 9 might be hinting at. Somehow their actions have threatened everything that in the last 8 days has been about. We are reminded of the death of Uzziah, who put out his hand to steady the ark, and was immediately struck down. Perhaps also the deaths of Ananias and Sapphira in Acts 5 are relevant. Although not a cultic situation, the new presence of the Lord in the pouring out of the Spirit in that community may have intensified its holiness, and their lie, which Peter states was not to men but to God, threatened this heightened state of purity. In verse 3, Moses does not comfort the appalled Aaron. He explains the moment by a saying of God's which is not found in the Bible. Aaron remains silent. He understands, even if he is overwhelmed. His remaining sons are not permitted to carry the bodies of their brothers because the priests must not be contaminated by death. They serve before the living God. This is also why Aaron is not allowed to mourn, which will be explained in chapter 21. In verse 5 it says that the bodies were carried out by their tunics, which has caused interpreters to speculate over how exactly these two were killed if their clothing was not consumed. But the sadness is accentuated by this reference to their clothing, which was a priestly honour. A joyous occasion has been severely marred. The congregation may mourn, but this is a challenging moment for Aaron, where his loyalty between his family and his God is being tested. The holiness of God is a fearful thing, and with the great honour of serving him came great danger. As well as the pain of this punishment, there was the problem of contamination. Death was now contaminating the sanctuary. The question of how to deal with this situation is suspended at this point, to be taken up again in chapter 16.